Shirish Dalal, the Vice President and Head Advent L&T Energy Hydrocarbon Engineering, and Mr. Partha Day, Executive Vice President and Head Oil, Gas and Hydrocarbon, TATA Projects Limited. Mr. Dhobley is the CEO and Business Head of Global Chemicals, Fashion, Yarn and Insulators, Aditya Birla Group. With a wealth of experience and expertise spanning over 3 decades, Mr. Dhobley has been instrumental in driving P&L, innovation, growth and sustainability in his roles. He completed his bachelor's degree in engineering, specializing in polymer technology from MIT Pune. Over the course of his career, he has garnered experience in various facets of the specialty material, polymer and chemical industry. He has worked in the global roles across multiple domains, including P&L, operations, mergers and acquisitions, and is spearheading greenfield projects. Welcome, Mr. Dhobley. I invite Mr. Partha Day and Mr. Shirish Dalal also to join, and I'll hand over the dais to Mr. Dhobley to do the honors for the panelists and introduce them.
Okay, so last session stands between us and lunch, has to be interesting and effective. But I have with me on projects 2 very reputed institutions presented here. You can't get any better than having Tata and L&T on the same platform. Thanks a lot, Shirish and Partha, for being here. I always find these formal introductions, you get on a piece of paper to be really boring. And I hate to hear myself introduced that way, and I suspect many of you feel the same. So maybe if I could ask Partha and Shirish to just maybe quickly say a few words about yourself before we start, maybe starting with you, Partha. There is your mic.
Hello. Hi. Good afternoon. Thank you. Honored to be here in such an... Hello. Okay. Honored to be here. Good afternoon once again. And as Jayant said, we'll make it as interesting as possible so that we can hold you here till you get into the lunchroom. Overall, around 3 decades into purely on EPC oil and gas, petrochemicals, onshore, offshore, chemicals, specialties, infrastructure, both India, Middle East, and Europe. I've been in all facets of EPC, and I'm lucky to be here today and have worked with some leading organizations, worked for some greatest asset owners in the world, around the world actually. And I'm happy to be here and there. And I would like to share some insights on the execution challenges, both in the execution phase as well as during operations. And I hope to pick up a few questions from you, which I could answer, and make the discussion very insightful and interesting. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've been with L&T for the last 30 plus years now. And before that, I was with Godrej. I've been other companies also. But my experience spans mainly design, and then now, after that, project management. I'm heading a group known as Advent, which is part of the L&T Energy group of companies in L&T. Primarily responsible for differentiated projects which span the chemicals, hydrocarbons, and whatnot. So my expectations and role here would be try to answer questions from you and learn from you about what you expect from us as EPC players who can help you with implementations, and we can also share our challenges that we go through and where both of us as owners and operators or other stakeholders, I just took 2 names, can help each other make the ecosystem a much more robust in terms of project delivery. Thank you.
Thanks, Shirish. Thanks, Partha. So, I started my career in project type of roles very early, maybe in my early 20s, and have been responsible for defining, executing, making a mess of, creating all kind of chaos through projects for most of my career since. And I'm still waiting to achieve my dream of achieving a project which was defined perfectly and started up perfectly from start to end. So maybe one of these days I will achieve it. Very often when we from the chemical industry look at projects, we run through some very typical stages which I think afflict large corporations. We spend a lot of time working on financials of projects. We don't spend enough time actually thinking of what technology goes in, what choices we will make. We lose a lot of time in actually internal approvals. Maybe some organizations are an exception. And then we expect the project to be executed very fast, right? Like yesterday. And projects are very complex things. So maybe, drawing on your years of experience, if I could ask each one of you, from an execution perspective, EPC perspective, you have been through many projects. Which would you quantify as the biggest pain point that you normally encounter? And what do you think are opportunities to execute projects well, commercially and technically, which in general the chemical industry misses? So one pain point and one opportunity, maybe starting with you, Partha.
Thank you, Jayant. There are mighty opportunities, I should say, to be positive in executing EPC projects. And there are even mighty challenges, actually, if you look at it from the perspective of EPC contractors. And it's a whole gamut of a combination of the stakeholders who are involved in it. I mean, starting from the owners, the licensors, the executors, and of course, the statutory bodies around us who also contribute towards the success or a failure of a project, basically. Going by the current statistics, I was reading something while coming this morning, 30 and 40% respectively in terms of schedule and cost are the overruns we are seeing in the recent projects. This is a research done by the big four consultants, actually, if you look at it today. And I believe the numbers are quite conservative. The numbers probably are far more towards towards 50 and plus, basically. Now, if you look at the overall complexity of the projects, there are several contributory factors which all starts with a premature DFR, the feasibility report. We are always on a hurry to come and award something to the contractor, actually. So, and also at the time of award, at the time of tendering, I believe, there's a lot of things missed out. I don't say it intentionally, probably at the hurry, at the rush of time. And at the end of the day, we know we have an EPC contractor at the end of the line who would put all those dots and crosses together. And if not, we have a stick in terms of an LD or a penalty clause to impose on them, basically. So I think we will have several other points to discuss. I think defining a project early on in terms of its operability, in terms of about its maintainability, and how we go ahead and build it, basically, so that we meet the intended IRR and the other financial goals and technical goals. I think the definition part remains key, where we set the ball rolling in the right direction, actually, so that we are meeting the intent at the end of the day, not blaming each other, being one-minded stakeholders who work towards the goal of it. So as we go, we will discuss some of other typical challenges which are there. So just to keep it short, I believe a definition of a project at the early stage, and not only technical and the licensor's point of view, but in terms of executing in what sequence we do, what are the requirements, what are the available material in and around the place, labor workforce, technology availability, skill sets availability. I believe these are probably the key. If we can get those right, which is not very easy, but if we can 50% of that right, I think we would have set ourselves in the right path to get the right end result. Yeah.
What I believe is most of the projects which manage change well end up successful. While what Partha says is correct, most of the projects we tend to sort of step in assuming that we will evolve or will keep on changing or making adjustments as we grow. When you do a project as a contract, unless it's been done internally, you need to address the fact that situations change, situations evolve. For whatever reasons, be it geopolitics, be it the labor issue, be it the commodity prices, anything. And if the persons executing, those stakeholders do not have an well understood and well defined change management process, it's always going to be a challenge. It could be something simple as an operating guy saying, I need this additional transmitter or an additional condensate line, to something you say, no, I need it, saying that this is a change order going to come in. But as long as there is a mutual trust and respect for the changes that are going to be done, and we have a process and a procedure in place as to how we are going to take this forward, I believe the process of project execution can be much more simpler. Sad to say, at least under the Indian context, and I'm talking from an EPC contractor point of view, excuse me for that, we believe the contracts tend to be one-sided from our perspective. An owner or for that matter any stakeholder cannot expect risk mitigation to be offloading of a risk. You are part of the problem, you are part of the solution. We need to address issues as they evolve. And if that collaborative effort is there, if that symbiotic effort is there, I'm sure project execution can be much more simpler. To this, we need to learn from some companies, and I don't intend to say that other companies don't have, but I'm talking from my experiences. Let's say, take Aramco, take Reliance. The conditions, the evolving process, the entire project has been thought through at length from various angles, and then it is taken up for execution. If we do that, and even if there's a change, there's a mutual understanding that it will be taken care. So it gets resolved quickly. Last but not the least, and again I bring up my EPC contractor's perspective, I heard statements made by owners, no disrespect meant again, that EPC contractors are not, even if it's extended, it doesn't matter. Just to give an quantitative statement, if any project that loses time, we tend to lose about 0.3, 0.4% of the contract value per month. So if an EPC contract gets, or any for that project gets delayed, it's not just that the owner loses money, it's also the other stakeholders who lose money. So what's important to address final point is change management. If we are able to take care, and then all stakeholders will make the issue and the change required as the real point of this thing, projects become simple.
Thanks, Partha and Shirish. Sorry, you want to add something?
I just wanted to endorse what Shirish just now mentioned. In this dynamic world where things are happening at a very fast pace, I think having a robust management of change system existing both across all the stakeholders, I think it's key actually. Probably we cannot change the happening of change, but what we could do is that if we can capture those in the right way, probably, and at least the stakeholders would be happy at the end of the day, both from all corners I'm talking about, not only from the EPC contractor's perspective, I think Shirish has touched upon right, and it just, I think it was a right flow that I brought up the challenges, and Shirish was more or less trying to give us a kind of a solution to how do you manage the dynamic environment. Thank you, Shirish.
Thanks. See, look, there are a couple of interesting angles that come up. One is scope management and change, and often this discussion that at least I have seen in the industry of doing turnkey project versus doing execution through various EPC contractors. We'll try and touch on both through our conversation, but let's start with scope. As you have experienced and I have also experienced, very often this is underestimated, which results in a lot of subsequent issues, right? And what I've also experienced is that scope changes versus engineering changes versus escalation is not often clearly understood and defined. So, could you share with us a little bit your perspective on good practices or good ideas that you have seen that kind of result in a very good scope definition, and thereby, some ideas or best practices that you have come across?
If I could take it, for an EPC contractor, irrespective of the technology or the sector where we are, the business, our business, the core of our business lies on defining the scope, so that we can define it, we execute, and we make money out of it, or we make profit, or we don't make loss. So irrespective of the sector, I think if you give it to an EPC contractor in terms of what is written in black and white in a document and whatever his experience calls for, I think they do a fairly good job in terms of defining the scope. What happens is that the scope creep which happens where the owner or the end user comes with an afterthought in terms of redefining or further detailing the scope or the boundaries of execution. That is where the whole game gets tilted towards that we start finding each other in a weak spot, or in a I'm losing a word actually, in a place where we are unequal basically, or we are not fair, I should say. So it comes in various names and various definitions. From the owner's side, it often comes as a design development, good engineering practice, and so on and so forth. And we keep saying, no, it's a change. It is having a material impact on schedule or on cost, basically. I believe spending a considerable amount of time in defining, again, I'm going back to my earlier position actually, defining it better, allowing contractor to ask questions, not to get intimidated by difficult questions or difficult queries, and be able to open up and tell what is the ultimate intent. And if there are any gray areas, there are contractual mechanisms available in the contract where you can define, keep it under a provisional sum, keep it under a change scope basically, and which can become firm as we move and as the engineering matures. I think openness is something which is key, and it's a human philosophy actually. We don't have to get into technical details. It's a human philosophy that we remain open on what we want to do. And frankly speaking, in the overall value chain of a plant coming up and it's producing for next 30 years, EPC forms a very small component of it. So let's not spoil that element part of it, and let's define it properly so that we build something which is built to last, which can produce spec product, give you specified items over next 35, 40 years, whatever the design life of a plant actually. So defining it upfront, being open, listening to the contractors or helping them, because sometimes we get into a different contracting philosophies actually, and the contracting philosophies does help in mitigating certain risks actually. But at the end of the day, the onus of providing the right information remains with the owner. By all practical means, it remains with the owner. If you have not provided any information, you have left the contractor into the field to execute certain things. I don't think it's fair, not because I belong to the EPC contracting community, because I have worked very closely with the owners, engineers, and with the asset owners, basically, where certain organizations have a culture to define and redefine things and also take the brunt of it in case there are changes, only to ensure that they achieve the right product, they achieve the right, the right plant producing the right kind of products at the end of the day. I think definition remains key for me. I think that's where the whole game starts, or whole thing starts, basically. Thank you.
See, what we at L&T and most of the EPC companies have this, and I'm sure owners also must be doing it. We try to monitor the change register very systematically as part of our project risk reviews and internal reviews. At the end of every month, a change register is issued and a risk register is issued, where we try to capture the changes that are happening. Now, most of the time, I would request other stakeholders is that if these change registers are mutually noted, the disputes would be there, differences may be there, but they can be resolved. But in some cases, because you don't agree, no decision is taken and time is lost. And if that aspect can be taken care by all stakeholders, it would really help us a lot. Because the contract remains the Bible, for all the stakeholders. But if there is something inconsistency of this, something not really very well defined, as Partha said, what we could do is keep this as a noted point to be noted and to be taken forward, but action keeps moving. So this is one thing we really need to incorporate in all the projects, be they small value or be this big value. And here an owner has a big role to play, or the developer, primarily because it's his confidence that other stakeholders will not be expected to take the burden, undue burden of what is missed out. That itself is a very positive statement. And I would believe that this would make a lot of difference to the performance of and the delivery of any project execution.
Thank you. Taking maybe a different tack now from scope and execution. The Indian chemical industry is doing very well in the last few years, right? And there is a lot of scope for further expansion. However, the elephant or the dragon in the room is China. They have 55% of the world's chemical capacity. A large amount of chemicals from China come into India. So when the chemical industry thinks of putting up projects in India, front and center, we are often thinking of, will we be competitive versus the Chinese? And that essentially boils down to the cost of the capital of the project, that boils down to the operating cost of the project, that boils down to often the difficult regulatory and poor infrastructure we have to execute in. Yet, of course, we have to compete in the market, right? So, both your companies do projects not only in India but outside of India. How would you rate or think of opportunities from the Indian chemical perspective or the Indian industry's perspective to set up projects which can not only compete with the Chinese, but can outcompete maybe with the Chinese? And turning around the sequence a bit, maybe Shirish, this time I ask you to go first.
I'll answer this from L&T perspective, so excuse me for that. See, chemical industry as an segment is definitely something that is facing a time where the headwinds are much less than the tailwinds. If you look at the opportunities, they are quite high. The problem with us in India is that we believe that China is much better. Somewhere I believe we don't want to look at our internal capabilities. And in these internal capabilities, I would include the execution agencies, and I would say that who is going to execute the project as an EPC or even internal. If we focus on this particular thing, I believe there is no reason why we cannot, the China plus one is just not going to be a slogan, it's really going to happen. That's point number one. Second point is that when we always face this challenge that cost of capital is relatively high in India. Yes, it is high in India, but that's what it's also in China. If you ignore the fact that Chinese government cross-subsidizes this, people may not agree with this, but everybody of us know this. I mean, the cost of capital or the kind of resources available is equally good. What is important as an Indian industry segment, if we can, rather than trying to say that I will do everything, and which is then automatically restricting our ability to think big, if we can say, okay, I will collaborate with others, I think we can do much better. There are classic cases, but again, no names to be taken, which have grown big in the industry, not because they were restricted, they also were having. They took help of others who can take away part of their problem. Yes, if it means that you have to depend on others, so be it. The challenge for us as Indians is that we tend to say, no, it's going to pay. But the cost of time is somewhere missed out. So I do believe EPC as a model needs to really come in. Towards this, just to give an example, I had a group known as Advent within L&T Energy, where we have our business focus is on a segment which is differentiated projects. We are not really working on the top line kind of a thing. We look at small value projects also, but which bring in a differentiated project execution strategy, which take away the project problems of the owner onto us. Our strengths, we use it to take away part of the customer's problems. And I'm sure other companies also may be having certain similar thing. And I am sure if all of us work together in finding a solution, it's going to be much more the chemical industry. I'd heard 27, 28%, but if you say 55, I'm much more scared. But still, we can do it. Why not?
Thank you, Shirish. I think we are at the cusp of, an inflection point. And when you look at the chemical industry development, both in bulks and in numbers, China might be ahead, but I think we have a great opportunity to catch up and surpass them soon, basically, in a more, in a systematic manner, actually. It's not going to happen overnight. I believe skill development in India in terms of the workforce having specific skill development, which Tata is trying to do in Tata projects, actually, where we get, skilled craftsmen coming out from specific institutes where they are guaranteed that they will be absorbed into operations, into execution of jobs. That's one area. Having different kind of model contracting structures whereby it gives an opportunity for a chemical or a specialties, to actually define the scope as they move forward, as they take the whole thing forward, not wait for a final closure and then transferring it to a EPC contractor. There are opportunities. I think the overall geopolitical scenario has placed India in a reasonably good position today, actually, in terms of attracting latest technologies, in terms of setting up new plants, the PLI schemes which are there in the country, basically. I think all of that put together, it gives, I'm quite positive and quite, enthusiastic as I look ahead in terms of, and the chemical industry per se, their performance and the amount of cash reserves and the amount of opportunities they see in and around the Indian subcontinent. I think it places India in a very, very strategic position today. And this is a time to take advantage of what we can do in terms of improving our execution capabilities, going ahead and employing the best, contractual terms, financial terms, employing the best of the technology, going more modular, doing things early, doing things in a phased manner, basically. I think all these are contributory factors which can help us be at par or get very close to our neighbors in this sector.
Thanks. You know, as the Indian industry needs to grow, the chemical industry in particular, innovation becomes very important. And very often innovation is often thought in terms of product, like you come up with more and more specialty products, and I think that's surely a big part of the game. But I also believe there is a lot of process innovation that is possible in basic chemistries. You know, we are here in the chloralkali industry, and earlier this morning we had some very interesting sessions on innovation that can happen also on the process side. Very often, when the industry thinks of innovation, whether it is process innovation or product innovation or even application innovation, we do it in our own world. I have myself, for example, never thought of a process innovation with my R&D group and said, let's involve our project contractors at this stage, right? And I'm now asking myself if the Indian industry needs to kind of leapfrog, and rather than just copy what the rest of the world is doing and always stay 3 steps behind, is there a different model in which the chemical industry needs to engage project contractors, designing agencies, people who do detailed engineering? Any thoughts on that? And maybe again, starting with you, Shirish, there's a lot of innovation happening in the hydrocarbon space.
Innovation by itself has multiple facets to it, while the technology part of it has its own set of issues. Even the way you execute, the way you implement, the way you conceptualize has a lot of innovation possibility to this. We call it value engineering internally. And just to give an example of some projects where we go all out for value engineering, when the customer comes in with a set of, it could be a tender or a requirement, we sit with him, we suggest to him value engineering with a clear understanding that if he is able to reduce the cost of the project, we share 50-50, we share whatever it is, 80-20, whatever. It could be anything. Now, what has this got to with innovation? Somebody may say, I'm talking innovation, not necessarily trying to take you to the moon or to a next level. Even if you save time, even if you say even if you are able to remove what is not really required, if you are able to design fit for purpose, I believe that's an innovation. A lot of technology where and this is our experiences that comes from out of India. And then they are designed for standards, statutory requirements which are different from what is required in India. And I'm not saying not necessarily to cut the cost. We believe when we look at it differently, we say, this is not really required, let's remove this. Some places we also said, let's automate this. Some places we have said, forget it, we'll modularize this and send it to you. So the cost of execution, the time of execution has come down. So innovation has multiple issues to this. In a few cases, especially where it's an open art technology, we have done simulations and we have found out that there were gaps in the so-called process licenses. And customers have accepted it. So what is, again I repeat, is collaboration between all stakeholders. Everybody in the ecosystem has something to offer. What is necessary is to say that, okay, let me listen, and not just hear. And then say whether I pick and choose and make it an collaborative effort so that everybody has something to make it better. And innovation is just not something necessarily, as I said, anything that's better is innovation in my opinion.
Thank you, Shirish. Just to continue from where Shirish started, actually, I think giving ourselves time. Innovation is, it needs time, it needs space, basically. Conceptualizing very early on and thinking out of the box, actually. Today, the chemical industry in India is quite matured, and we have, in spite of technology coming from elsewhere, I think we have acquired a lot of knowledge within us, within the sector, basically, and within different groups. I think we could use many of them which are indigenized, which are local, and we could map it with the available technology, and I think we can bring a lot of innovations in it. And again, which Shirish touched briefly on, that is being very open at the early stage, knowing exactly what we are looking for, I think is key. And today, bringing an element of digitalization, modularization, mixing of technologies, the experience of the existing operating plants within the country and within the sector. A lot of it is within the country. And plus, if you see today, every licensor wants to open an office in India, basically. You have a huge workforce, technical, qualified, young workforce in this country, actually. And I think we should take advantage of those and bring innovations to the surface. And I believe it's not something out of the world. Innovation comes from all these elements put together. And I would once again emphasize that if we can start early, if we can think of it very, very early, I think we will be able to pace the project in a way that we bring innovations and we bring success overall at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll come to my last question of the day in view of time and lunch and audience fatigue. So, if you would look at the project industry, particularly in the concept of the chemical industry, right? Say in a horizon frame of 5 to 10 years, the next 5 to 10 years. And if we could miraculously transport ourselves to that future, what do you think will have changed in the industry if you would, put yourself in 2034 and, what would you find different? Maybe going with you this time first, Partha. So imagine how do you think the Indian project industry and the chemical industry, which are tied together, if you imagine them in, let's say, the year 2024, what will we find different than what it is today?
10, 12 years down the line, I would see the whole industry packaged or modularized, basically. I want a product. I want to change the intermediaries. I would have schemes available. I would have modules available where I introduce, I fit, I plug and play, and I get the product, basically. I believe that's the need. And I believe I was in one of the talk shows recently, a month back. I think we would see all the ancillaries in and around, basically, which help the growth of the core industry. I think we'll see a lot of changes in the logistics, a lot of change in the ancillary who support the core industry. And I would believe a lot of modularized thinking in terms all from engineering point of view, procurement and construction point of view, to come to an end state quick. I believe the gestation period would far, far shorten from what we are thinking. If I think of it today, probably 1 year down the line, my plant would be producing. So I think it would be, what I see, it would be fast and more accurate in terms of product and substance, basically. That's what I see.
I'll talk from the Indian perspective. See, today the problem of India is the quality of people and the quality of actual implementation that goes with it. 10 years down the line, with the kind of infrastructure that's developing and the kind of skill upgradation that's happening, at least I see a lot of things coming in, cross-seeding of ideas from relatively much more established industries like the hydrocarbon industry will percolate down. Our scales are definitely going to become larger in the chemical industry, which makes it also beneficial and possible to adopt much more automation things. And automation just to could be in various forms. It could be in terms of modularization, it could be in terms of automatic welding, it could be in terms of, prefabricated structures, whatnot. Whatever that leads to saving in time and in this thing would be there. One important point which is going to be absolutely unavoidable, and this is something the chemical industry, I may be missing a point, but I would still make this in terms of what I see, is in terms of the HSE part of it. I do believe there's a long way we have to upgrade ourselves for reasons which are lack of exposure, it could be various historical legacy issues. HSE in the chemical industry is bound to see a much, much better performance. The way today hydrocarbon industry, it's practically rare to see failures on account of HSE. Yes, there are challenges during execution, but once a plant is there, it's running, it's very this thing. Just to give an example of our performance, I mean, we do about 100 million man-hours of lost time incident without lost time incident. That's a typical fantastic HSE performance. But whereas relatively in the roads and other things, these are much more lower. So I do believe this is going to percolate, this is going to cross it into this thing. So that's going to be one drastically this thing. With the government's push towards creating industrial hubs, I do believe it will have its own, cross and symbiotic relationship coming in with everybody trying to help each other there, where these facilities would be shared between the non-core facilities, if I may use, effluent treatments and so on. But industrial hubs are going to be able to allow companies to grow much bigger than what they can do. And last but not the least, we are going to stop thinking local. And I believe India is in a good position. It's at the right place, inflection point, where our dreams need not be restricted to local boundaries. We are capable. And I see it's happening in 10 years down the line. We may be, if not number one, definitely will be a close number two there, able to compete against China in West. And I use China just as a reference point because they are there today. We will be there in the industry not just based on cost, but based on the value that we bring into the system. And I'm sure with leaders like Jayant and others here in this fall, we will definitely see a lot of progress up. Thank you.
Thank you, Partha. Thank you, Shirish. Not only do you bring your own huge experience to this audience, but also of the institutions behind you. I really appreciate your presence. The audience appreciates your presence. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a very interesting discussion, though it was the last session. Now I'll request Hemant sir to please present the mementos to our guests on the dais and formally propose the vote of thanks. A group photo, sir, and then vote of thanks.
Good afternoon. I think it has been a wonderful journey starting on 4th. Our 50 years we are completing. We are thankful to all our industry leaders who have supported us for this journey. We had some of the best leaders who have, graced us during these 4 days. Today's concluding Chloralkali, my good friend Jayant Dhobley ji has spent a lot of time. I know how his schedule is with his responsibilities, but I know once he is committed, and as we say, we are very fortunate to have friends like Jayant, Ashwin Bhai, Rajendra Bhai, Rajju Bhai, who came on a last minute request that to come here and speak a few words. Extremely thankful to all of you. I am sure you must have enjoyed the deliberations during the 4 days and must have got to see through the latest technologies and which are displayed. Once again, thank you. Once again, thank you, Jain Bhai. Friends like you are shouldering Chemtech. That's why what Chemtech is all about. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Thank you so much. And please join for lunch. Thank you.